Go Motorbikes, Super 73 S1. When you think about the e-bike, you might think about the type of no-nonsense transportation favored by ride-or-die commuters or Montessori teachers or spry retirees with bionic knees. Something practical with a basket and a bell. Something to get the job done, and mainly electric just to help with the hills. When the Super 73 first launched on crowdfunding, back in 2016 or so, it seemed aimed at deleting that boring image from your brain with Instagram-worthy looks and a whole new riding ethos. Not so much no nonsense as full nonsense, in the best possible way. For a lot of people, Super 73 was the first time they thought about an electric bike at all. I remember seeing it on that first Kickstarter, but I was too cheap and practical to pull the trigger on a 4-figure bicycle. But a lot of people did, and it was a success. It was a new thing, but it borrowed a lot from some beloved cultural icons. It was part taco mini bike, part New Belgium fat tire bar bike, with the beer holder included on that original model, and part something else entirely. It was the birth of the scrambler-style electric bike, or e-bike. But that term sounds a bit too much like e-cig for me, along with all its swaggy YOLO 2010s hoverboard dipshittery. So we just call them motorbikes. And I hope that name sticks, because it's descriptive of what this style of bike really is. In late 2019, there are a lot of scrambler-style electric motorbikes popping up on the market. Like, a lot. Many of these emerging companies seem to be branding experiments for existing Alibaba Chinese designs from just a couple of manufacturers. There are multiple brands that are just the same frame set with 3 different styles of hub motor remixed into a number of permutations. With all this apparent growth and interest in this kind of bike, it seems to make sense to start off by talking about the Super 73. Even with only 3 years on the market, it's really the original gangster of scramblers, at least for the newly bike curious. I did not buy my Super 73 new from Lithium Cycles. That's one of the cool things about waiting a minute before jumping headlong into the hot new thing. I was able to pick one up on Craigslist with about 15 miles on the clock. It was bought new from a guy who just didn't use it. I think he might have had a bit of a crash and decided it wasn't the thing for him, but that's none of my business. Do I think the bike is worth buying new at current MSRP? I mean, sure. In fact, I'd buy one again in a heartbeat. It's actually something you may suspect you'll like, but you don't truly get until you ride the thing. One of the first things you notice about the Super 73 when you're lucky enough to see one out in the wild is that it's actually pretty small. The short standover height and relatively diminutive dimensions are part of its appeal. It's like an old Honda 90 trail bike or a moped. Relatively few people are going to be intimidated by it, and really just about anybody can ride it. That philosophy paid off big for the likes of Honda and a bunch of other Japanese motorcycle companies back in the day. You meet the nicest people on a Honda, and just about every other garage in America seemed to have one, or 2. So strong is the nostalgia for those heady days of farting around the neighborhood that certain classic models of the trail bikes have become expensive collector's items, as well as the centerpiece of a rich aftermarket and modification industry. Will the Super 73 still fire up on the third kick after 30 years of sitting around a suburban garage? Probably not, but it's certainly filling a well-loved niche in the culture. One that I think more people are going to be looking for in the next few years. The next thing you'll notice about these bikes is the fat tires. I first started noticing fat tire bikes like this about 10 years ago when I lived in Alaska. They became really popular, mostly on mountain bikes for winter commuting and riding in snow. They look cool and are functional, if not a bit finicky and prone to flats if you aren't careful. But I don't think fat tires are really the headline here, at least not for me. I find the bike to be stable and haven't had any trouble getting traction or maintaining it, but in a lot of ways they feel more like a design element than a real necessity to make the bike what it is. But I can also see that 4-inch tires on 20-inch rims is the right setup for an electric hub motor like this. It seems to be what just about every company is using. For any practical purpose, the Super 73 is actually pretty bad at being a bike. Its rear sprocket has a measly 14 teeth, and there is no shifting. If the battery went dead, you'd be pretty uncomfortable and a slowpoke compared to even the slowest of bikes. But criticizing that kind of thing is missing the point. It's a cruiser. When you ride a cruiser bike, speed is never the concern. It's nice to be able to get up to speed, but you want to be able to do that in style and have fun. I find myself leaning on the throttle pretty hard when riding the Super 73. Pedaling is generally just a way to get off the line and up to speed more quickly. That said, it's really fun to pedal, and you shoot off like a little rocket, and you can bomb down alleys like some sort of small-town Casey Neistat. The general design, build, component choice, etc. are pretty good. To be fair, I'm not a high-end bike aficionado like most of the reviewers out there. In fact, I don't intend these reviews to be highly technical or spec-based. That information is out there in a ton of places, and I don't think it's useful except for reviewers themselves. But the general fit and finish and functionality of the bike is far less Chinesium than many of the other bikes in the class, and at this price point. If you don't really know what that means, never mind. But I tend to give a lot of points for design and sense of purpose, and the Super 73 has that in spades. I also think it's better than most in terms of frame design, color choice, seat design, those kinds of things. These elements all feel classic and speak to a larger group of people than not. A lot of the competitor bikes have one or two things that just feel off or cheapo or not right. Super 73 feels like a factory-built custom thing and just comes off right. The controller display screen on the Super 73 is one of the simplest I've seen, and it's not too glossy or full of features. And I think that's a great thing, and I wish more of the competition would take this approach. I don't really want a big glossy color display with lots going on. I just want simple and functional, and that's what this bike has going on. It has 3 settings, so you can decide your speed range and then control your battery usage from there. For me, I just tend to put it in the highest setting and leave it, but your mileage may vary. The bike comes equipped with a headlight and taillight, both of which are pretty much necessary if you're going to be riding at speed and in and out of traffic. You can turn off the headlight for battery savings, I guess, but I wouldn't do that. You really want to be as visible as possible, especially when this thing is Prius quiet. I find the headlight to be plenty bright and safe and fun for night rides, though you may want to make sure that your beam is pointed at an appropriate height and angle so you're not fully blinding the oncoming. The stock seat that came with the S1 was that little wedge, and I replaced it with the longer banana offered by Super 73 almost immediately. I think you're probably going to want to do the same. Maybe a smaller, lighter rider wouldn't notice as much. I also wanted to be able to have a child passenger periodically, and the longer seat easily accommodates us 2 up. I added some basic BMX-style foot pegs as well for stability for the passenger. When riding solo, I can use the pegs to sit in that more cafe style on the bike. I assume I look like a flabby, bald monkey humping a football, but you're going to get the side eye from the moms at the elementary school pickup no matter what you do. If you've done any mountain biking or proper dirt biking, you know that suspension is kind of a big deal. The Super 73 is by no means an off-road machine. It's a rigid steel frame and not a cushy ride, despite what the fatty tires would try to have you believe. The chain slaps the frame when you hit a pothole. But that doesn't mean it isn't perfectly capable of handling a decent trail or gravel fire road, and at speed, without beating you to death. You'll have fun, I guarantee. That said, it sucks on hills. You can make your way up a modest grade if you're willing to pedal, but if you get to a big hill, you may end up walking the thing up. The ride down will be funner, I promise. Being an Oregonian, I'm pretty firm on my belief that any bike, motor or no, needs fenders. Regardless of how cool a bobber may look, it's largely impractical for anyone but the fairest of fair weather riders. If you plan to get one, I'd make sure you get the fenders. They're not made of the toughest stuff, but they're functional and still look nice. That is, unless you like having a muddy strip up the back of your shirt. Your call. I think the S1 comes stock with fenders these days, but other models have them as an accessory. For me, the Super 73 came to life when I actually started using it. I have a revolving stable of bikes, vintage motorcycles, enduros, and that kind of dad bling. And I honestly am riding the Super 73 more than any of them these days. I live in a small college town, and anything I want to do beyond leave town is within a 1 or 2 mile radius. Jumping on the Super 73 to go to Trader Joe's or a business meeting or a school pickup is just as fun, and honestly sometimes quicker than taking my pickup or another motorcycle or any other vehicle I have. It does fine in a drizzle, and I'm not really one to be precious about my bikes anyway. I can throw it in the back of a pickup and take it wherever. For people who are truly new to riding, which I hope will be a growing number in the next few years as these things progress, I can see how exciting this can be. I remember being 12 years old when I first got a little Honda motorcycle. I could hardly sleep at night thinking about riding the thing. It's a pretty great feeling, and I think you could have that on a Super 73. Like a lot of lifestyle products, there are some serious Super 73 fans out there. To those folks, I'd say, me too, guys. I think it's a great motorbike, but is it the best of the best scrambler style, fat tire, electric motorbike out there? Well, we'd like to find out. So we're going to start getting our hands on some of the competition models and do some videos and write-ups. I think that in 2019, the S1 likely isn't the best of the best. And 2020 is going to be a big year for these things. What it is, though, is a lot of people's first ride. And it has more style than just about anything out there. And for that, it's special.